10 reasons why I left my stable job with the government to homeschool? I bet you want to know what those are. All right, I have broken them down for you. Hi, my name is Cheryl, and I'm probably a lot like you, a hesitant homeschooler. At least I was. I never imagined myself homeschooling my kids, but I knew the traditional school system wasn't right for us. So in 2023, I started a podcast interviewing homeschooling families. And I'm here to tell you everything that I have learned in the last 2 years with over 100 homeschooling families interviewed. What I have discovered has led me to quit my government job. That's right, the pension, just gone. But I'm here to tell you exactly what I've learned so that I can help you homeschool with confidence and ease. All right, let's get into this. So what are the 10 reasons that I left my stable job to homeschool? I mean, we're talking nights off, weekends off, holidays off, no mandatory overtime. I had just reached a 6-figure salary. I didn't even think that was possible getting into government work. Little did I know about the government, but a lot of people are making 6 figures, but I never saw myself doing that. I just, kind of went with the flow and tried to do the best I could. But yeah, I reached a 6-figure salary and walked away pretty much as soon as I hit that mark to embrace homeschooling fully. So that was huge actually for me to do. I never thought I would leave my job. I had always been told about the pension, and I was ready. I mean, I would have been making in my retirement 60% of my 3 highest years. I was 16 years in when I left. If I had 14 more to go, and I was already at $100,000 a year. We're talking you're making at least $60,000 a year in retirement. I mean, that's crazy until you die. It's not even like a 401k where hey, this might run out if you don't use it wisely or if it's invested poorly. This was just gonna be until I died. $60,000 a year. I don't even know what you'd do with that money if your house was paid and you didn't have kids to pay for. I mean, all right. But I gotta remember, I said goodbye to that. So what made me say goodbye to that? I think step 1 was learning about the true history of our education system. And if you really wanna get into this, I have a whole video about that, the education system and why it was set up. But in a nutshell, schools were designed to create the obedient worker, individuals that were smart enough to do the job, but not smart enough to question it or become competitors. So that is why the Rockefellers invested millions of dollars in the early 1900s into the education system. And if there's one thing that I do not like is kind of being had, I feel like, hey, education system, I stuck up for you for so long and this is what you were doing the whole time. And I totally see it now after 16 years in government work. Yeah, I was just told to nod and smile, show up, do what you're asked to do, nod, smile, and don't ask questions. That is school and government work in a nutshell. The next thing that was a huge reason for me was the CDC schedule. And I am really big on this. I did everything on the CDC schedule with my son, but that's because I trusted somebody who trusted the pharmaceutical industry, okay? These are the people that write the books for medical school. I mean, that's like Marlboro writing in the medical books that cigarettes are really healthy for you. And then your doctor telling you, I read this in my medical book, here, have a pack. It's no different. And actually that probably happened. The CDC schedule, I started looking into it, reading the documentation, watching documentaries, watching videos, watching testimonials, and looking at the studies or lack thereof, and realize that maybe this isn't how I want to raise my kids, okay? I can't tell you what to do because everybody is going to have a different level of comfort for their family. But I can provide you the insight into maybe it's something you want to look into because nobody told me that before, and I can point you where to look to. I will have a page of resources available. And, then you decide what works for you. But I knew for me, this wasn't something that I wanted to do anymore with my kids. In New York, we are one of the 4 remaining states that do not have a religious exemption, meaning if you don't follow everything on the CDC schedule that is recommended for school, you can't go. The other 46 states, and I'm talking other than New York, California, Maine, and Connecticut, those are the 4 states that you have to get everything on the schedule if you're going to school. So I'm in one of those 4 states. There was no way around it unless I drove to Vermont, which I was thinking of doing, but it's like in the opposite direction from where I worked. So it was not going to be convenient at all. That was the reason that I wanted to homeschool my kids, and leaving my job kind of seemed like something that I would have to do if I didn't want to drive to Vermont every day. Masking was another issue. So sure, we don't have to mask right now, but I don't know that they're not going to make us do that again, or that they're not going to make us do something else ridiculous. During COVID, schools overruled parents who didn't want to mask their children. This set a precedent for schools to override parents on other issues in the future. Issues like the gender thing. Now, in my state, they just passed something that schools don't even have to tell the parent when they give a medical product to a child under 18. That's crazy. It's ridiculous, okay? Wasn't gonna happen in my family. Sorry, not sorry. They're getting pulled out, and I'm coming home. Which leads to number 4, the breakdown of the family unit. Schools are removing the parents from the educational process. It's funny, in New York at least, we had what's called the Common Core. I'm pretty sure that's everywhere. It changed the way that math was taught. And I thought this was kind of funny because as I talked to teachers, they would say, it's not like you come to the answer any more quickly or in a more understanding way, in a way that's more easily understood. But it changed the process of the math problem and solving it so that the parents couldn't help their children. And you can just see that across the board. All of this is to erode the family unit, okay? And you can see it in many different aspects of the school system, but there is a breakdown of the family unit going on, and it's by design. They are pushing through laws that you don't have to tell parents about certain medical products that they are now able to inject into your children or give your children if it's for gender affirming medications. There's a lot of that is going right over the parent's head legally. Even if a child wants to be called a different name, they're not even talking to the parent first. So I just think that this sort of like hidden secrecy going on where parents aren't involved, it's between teacher and student, and they're removing the parent. It's dangerous. And my husband and I both were not comfortable with it. Which leads us to number 5, the transgender agenda going on in the schools. And I really think, the transgender issue, it's like just part of it, but I think it's all stepping stones to the breakdown of the family unit. Sure, there are people that probably do feel they're more comfortable in the other gender, but why are we pushing this in school? Okay, this should be something that parent and child discuss together, not having the school involved and hiding secrets from the parents. This is just dangerous. And actually, when you look into China and how they moved into a communist country, there was a lot of this going on, removing the genders. You're actually removing someone's identity when you are stripping them of their gender. You're also causing a lot of confusion. And in a society where kids are heavily pumped up with chemicals like red dye 40 and high fructose corn syrup and all the others, and then we're putting them in front of screens, which have tremendous impacts on their developmental brains. Synapses are forming, connections are being made. They're actually getting used to the screen change happening so quickly that when they're put in front of a book or just out in nature, they actually get anxiety. They chemically get anxiety in their body because they're so used to the screen changes. Then the removal of parents from the home and putting kids in the institution of school so early on. Now it's, 6 weeks old. If you're sending your kid off to daycare after a normal labor, at 6 weeks they're going to daycare. So this is like this removal of the parents very early on. It actually stresses a child out, and it stresses parents out too. But it's all pushing into this sort of, where is my identity, right? Where is my place? And so kids are feeling this, and the transgender thing is just the next big thing right now. And a lot of kids are hopping on it because it makes them feel like they're standing for a purpose. It makes them feel like they have a place to belong. We don't even live in a society anymore where you have to grow food, find water, build your shelter. That's great to some extent, but when you look at studies across the world, people that are the happiest are the ones that are actually striving to survive. They have a purpose every day. There's a great book called Tribe. I haven't read it yet, but it's been recommended to me multiple times, about how people that were in the war, veterans, the post-traumatic stress that they feel back at home has a lot to do with not having that purpose anymore, because they had the purpose when they were just trying to stay alive. It was just, how do I get through the day? How do I keep my men alive and my women, my tribe? And when we're in society and things are so comfortable and everything's given to us, there's a lack of purpose. So I think all of that funnels into this sort of agenda being pushed. And I feel bad for the people that are in it. And there are social justice warriors that feel that they're doing a good cause by fighting for a child's right to be called the opposite gender and get those gender affirming or hormone blocking drugs behind their parents' backs. But if you look at those kids in 20 years from now, I guarantee you 99% of them are not going to be happy with what was pushed on them. And you can hear interviews with people right now. So that's a huge agenda going on. The purpose behind it is not authentic. So we weren't going to allow that in our household. When they are 18 and adults and they have an opinion, then we'll support our kids at that point, but not in school. We're not paying for that with our tax dollars. Number 6, this sort of obedience to authority that schools are teaching. Now, I get it. We are big supporters of law enforcement. We have law enforcement in the family. However, when laws like you must wear a mask, even though there is no clinical evidence to show that this is helpful, these are policies that, we want our kids to understand it's not something you need to obey. We also want them to understand the difference between a policy and a law. A lot of times kids are not taught that, and that is by design. Oh yeah, that should be on here too. So, it all flows into this one, I guess, what they're teaching in school and this obedience to the authority, this hierarchical structure. I think that we need to teach our kids to question authority and move forward with what makes sense, and then take the appropriate measures to change laws that need to be changed. So this obedience to authority that schools are sort of pushing to teach children to obey authority without question rather than fostering independent critical thinking is something, we want to stay away from. We want our kids to question. Obviously, we want them to be respectful if something is not appropriate and take the appropriate measures to change a law that is unjust. But I want them to recognize that laws can be unjust, and you have avenues to take when that happens. All right, number 7 is learning by doing. I really want my kids to be able to learn by doing. This idea that they all are supposed to be the same age and in the same room, learning the same things at a desk in a very dry manner, that math needs to be taught alone and English needs to be taught alone and science needs to be taught alone. This is crazy. They can all be blended, and it's beautiful that way. It makes more sense to them that way. And not every kid is going to read or, tie a shoe at the same age. Again, their synapses in their brain are making connections at different times, and expecting them to all know the same thing at the same age and then testing them on it is ludicrous. So I really love the idea of our children learning through hands-on activities, pursuing their interest. It's just the best way to learn. It's going to stick with them longer, and they have more fun doing it. Number 8 would be the lack of time in nature when you are in the school system. I've had teachers on my podcast talk about how recess time and gym time has gotten smaller and smaller and smaller as the years go by. That just seems to be what they're cutting, and they just want more control over the kids. And it's harder to have control when they're out in the playground, or you have to get on snow gear. So this is really a tragedy, because kids learn best when they're out playing, and they get out all that energy and all that creativity when they're outside in nature. I didn't grow up a nature kid. We were indoors all the time, but as I've embraced it in my adulthood and with kids, I realize how important it is. And I'm actually learning about nature right along with my kids, which is the most fun part of homeschooling. I think I'm like having a childhood all over again. I had a woman on my podcast who she actually opened up a forest school, and her name was Aid Hoffman, and she talked about how children need about 45 minutes outside before they actually really get into creative play. And what she talked about is how, at recess is only about 15 to 30 minutes long, but that first 15-minute block, your child is just kind of like awkward and exploring the outside. What are they interested in today? It might take them 5-10 minutes to walk to a different area or go find a puddle. So now at that 15-minute mark, they're kind of like maybe playing in the puddle and, oh, this is weird. Look at it, makes this ripple effect when I touch it. What happens when I take a stick and touch that into it? And their brain is starting to go in that 15 to 30 minute mark. They're starting to get creative, thinking outside the box. It's not just a puddle that I'm going to get wet in. It's like, ooh, what happens if? And then that 30 to 45 minute mark, maybe they're like exploring with a friend now and what's underneath? Can we find what's under this puddle? Let's dig some things out. What happens if we try to take the water out of the puddle? What happens if we put things in the puddle? Their brains are just going and connections are being made, and it's actually sparking this just amazing chemistry in their brain and fulfilling a lot of their needs. So that 45 to 60 minute mark is where they're actually like creating this whole world about what's going on. They're having like a different language with their friends and different rules in this little society, and it's just making all of these connections in their brain, releasing chemicals that are so imperative to their growing and to meeting their needs at where they are, and really setting them up for being more relaxed and calm the rest of the day and being able to learn and take in more. So there is such importance to time in nature and just free creative play. Schools just don't offer that. Number 9. All right, this one is a super controversial thing. I don't want to get banned, YouTube, so I'm just going to say shelter-in-place drills, okay? The reason we have these shelter-in-place drills, well, if the place is that unsafe that you need to have shelter-in-place drills, why am I going to send my kid there? Okay, we don't have them anywhere else. We don't have them at the grocery store. We don't have them at the mall. We don't have them at a theme park or a movie theater. This is crazy. If it happens so often that we need shelter-in-place drills, why am I going to send my kid there every day? And then when they happen, you don't even let the parents go in to get their kid. That said, they don't happen too often, luckily, knock on wood. But the drills themselves are traumatic enough. The drills are basically giving your child combat zone experience. You're basically training them for war. You're training them for a war zone. So the training itself can be just as traumatic as the event. And, the event might happen once, but you're training them monthly. I had a school resource officer on my podcast. She homeschools her kid. What are your thoughts on like the shelter in place drills? That has become more of a reason that I don't want to send my kids to school. I think just the sheer aspect of having a shelter-in-place drill is kind of a traumatic event for a child, and we're like desensitizing them and teaching them that guns are the problem and your neighbor can turn against you at any time. But what are your thoughts, since you're in law enforcement? Are these traumatic events for kids? Are they necessary? Are schools even safe?
So that's definitely on my list of why I homeschool. And I am a school resource officer, so I'm specific to the schools. It's something that I have to do on a monthly basis, those drills with the kids. And it's not easy because, yes, we are essentially preparing them for a mass casualty event and what to do. But it's something that, as horrible as it sounds, has become common. And we've seen it throughout the years. The massacres, it's terrible. It sucks. And I'm sorry that there's not a fancier word. It sucks to put these kids in those mindsets.
But this is one of the reasons. They do monthly drills there, and they're elementary schoolers. So you're teaching kids that your neighbor can turn against you at any time. You're teaching them about weapons being bad and not really showing them an alternative to that. And you're kind of ignoring the other things that could go on. They're always centered towards this one weapon, but there could be a number of ways that it could happen. So I don't like the connotation around it either. So the psychological trauma of just the drill itself is enough reason for me to not send my child there. It just creates a fear-driven environment and it's harmful to the child. My number 10 reason for quitting my job to homeschool is just the shortness of childhood. Childhood is fleeting, and the bonding period that you have with your kids is brief. Money can always be earned. My $60,000 a year pension that I'm not getting anymore can always be earned later. But here's the thing. The dollar is being printed every day. We're just printing them, just more and more. it's decreasing its value. There is no guarantee that when I'm 60 years old, which seems like it should be 40 years from now, but it's only 20, there's no guarantee that the dollar is going to be worth anything. If the dollar collapses and my pension isn't there when I'm 60, what was the point of wasting all this time in a cubicle while my kids were in a school and we didn't get to share any of it together? So it's really framing that mindset around the value of your time versus the value of a dollar. We can't predict the future for tragedies or sicknesses either. So there could always be something that could happen, throws your life off course, an illness or anything. I've had moms on my podcast that have had cancer diagnoses, and this led them to homeschool their kids because they just knew time is short and it's not worth it being apart. You know, you have your kid for about 15 years before they're kind of like really living that lifestyle on their own. So say 15 to 18 years. That's so short in an 80 or 90 year life. Even if you have multiple kids, you've got a 20-year period where you are mom or you are dad. And when you're not there forming those bonds, and not to say that bonds aren't formed in a family that works and goes to school, but it's harder. There's inside jokes that go on between parent and coworkers and between kids and their peers at school or kids and teachers. And you know, you might be able to talk about it with your family at the end of the day, but those inside jokes aren't happening with the family, at least not on a regular basis. I look at my kids and how they're playing right now together, and it's beautiful to watch this. Sure, they fight too, of course, but even the fighting is beneficial because they're getting their emotions out and they're figuring how to work this out. When you do see them being nice to each other and helpful, it really melts your heart. There's something so beautiful about kids learning from kids of different ages. You know, the younger ones really take to what the older ones are doing. The older ones love having that leadership role. You know, and there's so many hugs a day that I get, especially from my 2-year-old, that I just think back to the time when my son was in daycare and in preschool, and I'm like, oh my God, I wasn't there for all of those hugs that she's giving me every day now that I am home with her at that age. So that breaks my heart a little bit. I have that perspective of the mom that worked and sent her kid to daycare, and now the perspective of the mom being home with her kid all the time. And I wouldn't trade what I have now, even if I have them locked in the basement while I record this video. No, I'm kidding. They're not locked in the basement. But you know, I wouldn't trade that for the world. And you know, I want to add to this list as well. I wasn't on my list, but just the sheer ability to let them sleep in the morning is so important. Their brains are working so hard to learn things throughout the day. Their bodies are growing. They might be going through a cognitive development change. You know, their bodies are going through a lot. If they need rest and you're waking them up at 5:30 to get them to the babysitters or to before care on the bus, I mean, that's just cutting right into what their body is needing at that time. So all of these are the reasons that I put together and decided leaving my job was worth it. Leaving the pension was worth it. The health insurance, all of it, to be home with my kids for this brief period of my life and theirs, and I haven't regretted it since. So thank you so much for watching. If you found this video useful, be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on that notification bell so you do not miss my upcoming content. I've got awesome videos, one on game schooling and what that is and how to choose the best games for the subjects that you want to teach. And don't forget to check out my podcast, The Homeschool How-To, interviews with homeschoolers, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.